All right. So I'm excited to have this conversation today with Jenn Wodtke. And Jenn is a orgasm and pleasure coach, which is not a conversation that I've had in this area with people, but I think is really kind of important to talk about around body acceptance. So I feel like when you've spent a lifetime of dieting, controlling your food, basically doing everything that's not related to pleasure. So like cutting all the pleasure out of your life. um, just trying to really getting used to living in a lot of suffering, I would say, and that being normal. Um, this idea of pleasure can seem foreign, kind of scary. We might even just cut all pleasure out of our lives. And then also from the aspect of people who don't feel good in their bodies, that really shows up in intimacy and relationships, not feeling good enough for, if it's being with a partner, you don't want lights on, like anything like that. So this whole area, I think, is really a good conversation to have today. So I wanted to just start out, Jenn, by asking you to share a little bit of like what brought you to be able to doing this work with people.
Yeah, I was actually just talking about this with someone last night over happy hour. I kind of checked all the boxes in my life. Like I had a teaching degree, I got married, I was off the pill, about to, start to seriously try having a baby. And then I kind of took a step back and I was like, I don't want to be in this marriage. I don't want this life. Like this was all a lie. And I felt like society had lied to me about the things that I'm supposed to do. And when I got that divorce, like my brain just exploded. I was like, I can do anything. And shortly after that divorce, I got into a new sexual relationship where for the first time it felt very fun and pleasurable. And that just sort of was the first path down this road to I want to learn more about my pleasure and I want to learn more about female sexuality and why do we have like the suffering that you mentioned and why do we have all these negative thoughts about our bodies when we have sex. Like I have that too. I think it's fairly common for women to worry about what they look like or what they taste like or if I'm taking too long. Like there's so much going on in the head. And for me, I think that especially for women, our pleasure is directly related to how much power we have in our lives. So I really think if we can unwind the pleasure and what blocks us from having the most explosive, pleasurable sex life, whether you're partnered or not, once we do that, then I think we really become more powerful in other areas of our lives as well.
Hmm. Interesting. So what do you so tell me then, what did you notice was like what kind of unlocked for you or what was the moment where you started to feel like more connected to your power?
The moment where I realized, I mean, it wasn't, I did, some people have like a moment. I sort of had a slower unraveling where I realized that I had numbed myself a lot. Like I wasn't living in my body, I wasn't connected to my body. Um, I'm still doing work with my body now. I have conversations with my body on a fairly daily basis where like, how are you doing? Like, are you ang-? And I've unraveled that in some ways my body hasn't felt listened to in a long time. And sort of having those conversations was this whole ball of wax that I wasn't present in the moment and I was numb. So everything just cut off. And when I started to do exercises and practices to really like just be with my body, that's when the pleasure really started
Mm,
to really be expansive.
yeah. Yeah, and a lot of what I talk about and do in my work is reconnecting back with your body and listening to your body. So I think we've, particularly in this culture, are taught to just be in our heads all the time. And I mean, I think Well, there's a lot of like generational stuff, particularly for women, and negative experiences and trauma around the body and sexuality. So I could understand too how that can almost feel like a little bit of a scary place to go to, not as safe. And so I'm wondering, like, can you speak a little bit to if it feels kind of scary to start to listen to your body or get connected to it again, um, how you what you sort of see in that, or how you kind of approach that with women?
I think the biggest, yes, it can be very scary, but I think taking a step back, I think sometimes we need to recognize that it's scarier to stay disconnected, like disconnected from our pleasure, disconnected from that wisdom. Like that's not really a great place to live your life from. So once we start doing this work, yes, and I've had sessions, I still get coached. I still have sessions where I'm sobbing on my living room floor after. And I think the thing to acknowledge about that fear, I had a really great session with somebody recently, and they said that fear is the absence of love. So I
Yeah.
think if we can reconnect to our bodies through love and recognize that because we haven't loved our bodies, that's where that fear comes from. So if we come at the work from a place of love, that fear can become more manageable. Like we still have to deal with it and acknowledge it, but fundamentally, we really have to, I don't know if I can say, like, love the fuck out of that fear. I don't know if we can say that on your channel, but
It happened. Yeah. Yeah, I think I like what you're saying too about how it's scarier to be disconnected. And I think that's what happens is in the mind, we end up creating a lot of story and fear about what's going to happen if we're disconnected, or if we encounter the emotion that comes up. And I talk about a lot when working with my clients of like seeing that emotion is safe. Emotion is actually a lot of times just related to old story or old fear that's not true. So if we can allow that emotion to move through and be with it, then that's like really the biggest hurdle. Um, yeah, you're gonna
yeah,
say something?
we can't think our way out of an emotional, we can't think
No.
our way out of trauma. Unfortunately, like we
Yeah.
have to feel our way out of it. And
Yeah.
that's sometimes a really hard truth and a really uncomfortable truth that comes up in coaching, in therapy, in any healing modality is that recognition. But once we sort of really can understand that, that's when we start to really transform and
Yeah.
move toward, reconnecting with our pleasure. And some ways it's almost becoming the person that we want to be.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, and I like that you this kind of exploration into pleasure as another portal into reconnecting and listening to your
Mhm.
body. So in my kind of world, women shut off from their body by seeing it as the enemy or the thing that's wrong, and not listening to it by not feeding it properly, not listening to what they're, being told that pleasure or desire is wrong. And so that comes a lot with food. Um, and of course, too, a lot of the work I do is a lot with women around body size as well. So we have this major belief in our culture that fat is bad, that it's ugly, that it's wrong. And yet something that I find interesting is, particularly with women, fat is a necessary component to the body. And I see fat as like softness, and there's comfort in it, and it actually can be very pleasurable, but that has not been the lens through which we've seen it. It's been a very I don't often talk about this, but I'm going to now. A traditional sense of like energetically, like, what's been seen as sort of masculine or feminine energetic qualities, because we've been so dominated by the masculine energy for so long, which is very kind of hard and angular and linear. And in men's bodies typically don't have a lot of fat on them. When that's seen as like superior to the feminine energy, it's going to make sense to me that we'd also demonize fat and softness and things that are kind of maybe unruly or uncontrolled, which, I see a real connection with that. And so to me, embracing, um, fat is also something that's like pleasurable and soft and comforting and is a different way of viewing it. It's like a reclamation of that feminine energy and that pleasure aspect. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that. I hadn't thought about it in that way, but I very much agree. And I think it's interesting too that like not only when we demonize people for fat, we doubly judge women.
Yeah.
Their bodies are held to a ridiculous standard, not only when they step outside the norm, not only if there's what is considered more fat or what have you, but also this, you're expected to be this ideal to please man. Like there's a double whammy in there that I think is just so unhealthy. Like,
Yeah. And that's something that's come up too is like women particularly have been taught to objectify their body, like their body is for a man. It's not for them.
yeah,
And so the work that you do, I understand is it's really all about like pleasure experiencing it within yourself. So you don't need
yes.
to be with another person in order to experience that. Um, and you also talk too about what you call like touchless orgasm. So
Mm.
I'm curious if you can speak to that a little bit more. Like, what is that? And yeah.
Yeah, I first experienced that spontaneously in my sleep, like a handful of times in my 20s. And, as just got into more formal sex education studies, like we talked about pleasure, but we didn't really go deep with it. Like we didn't talk about the kind of pleasure experience I was like kind of craving and wanted to get into. So I sort of abandoned that education. And when I got into coaching and realized that it was much more somatic, I was like, oh, these are the tools that I needed, that I was looking for. Like it's about that reconnection and it's about experiencing the pleasure that's already there. And much to my absolute joy, I realized that recreate, I could recreate that experience and have a completely touchless orgasm, which blew my mind. That happened in a group full of women when I was on a retreat. So I was kind of worried. I was like, can this be replicated? Like there was definitely a feminine energy in the room that really helped me move the energy and the pleasure through my body. But I got home, I put on a great playlist, and in the privacy of my own living room by myself, I was able to connect with the pleasure that is already inside of me that we all have. Like we all have a pleasure center that's always there. It's always alive. We just have often, I think, lost connection to it or starts to feel numb. But once you learn how to reconnect with it, you can circulate it through your body to experience whatever pleasure you want. It doesn't have to be orgasm. Like I realize some people are like, touchless orgasm is a party trick. So you don't have to go there. You don't have to go that far. Um, but just the power to be able to find that on your own is, I think, such an immense tool to have. If it's just for yourself, perfect. But then you can also use that when you're with a partner. Like you can begin to like circulate your pleasure energy with a partner and just have like even better partnered sex as well.
So where is our pleasure center? Like, where do you end up finding that?
It's typically in the pussy. A lot of women when they start to connect with the pleasure and the wisdom, they'll can often also connect with their wisdom in the belly, which is very close to the pelvic floor. And then it's just but it can be anywhere, right? Like we all have our very own unique sexual ecology. So That's the most common way in, but it's not the only way in. So a lot of what I coach and teach is to really find wherever the pleasure is in your body. Like people who connect with it through their heart, like through that love energy, like it really is wherever you find it in your own body. And then you can use the same tools to connect with it and make it grow and circulate it, right?
Yeah. So that's interesting because I think we're also just really taught that it only is a particular sexual experience, but pleasure can be accessed in different parts of the body too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally.
So why do you think that pleasure is important? Why, what motivates you to kind of do this work with women?
I think we live in our society is a holdover from puritanical times, and then we have this like cultural notion that there's something inherently worthy in sacrifice and self-control and like holding yourself back. And I think that that's hogwash.
Mhm.
Like, why? I don't know. What are we here for if not to experience and connect and have pleasurable experiences and have a pleasurable life? Like, isn't that what humans are for? Like, I don't know. Truly, like, if we're not allowed to express and experience pleasure, why are we here? Like, I just think it's a fundamental human right. I think it's access to spirituality. As I mentioned earlier, I think especially for women historically, pleasure has been connected to the amount of power they've been allowed to access. And I truly think that we need a pleasure revolution to sort of help women just reconnect with all of these things to just, I don't know, I almost feel like globally, if women connected more with their pleasure, like we would step more onto the global stage politically, financial resources, and just really be able to make more change in the world for the betterment of everybody. So I know I
Yeah.
sound like this huge idealist, but
No, I hear what you're saying. Because this idea of that you can't experience pleasure, like when I just think of it from the world of dieting and body image, that's all completely a limitation. Like
yeah,
it's saying you're not good enough as you are. You need to like essentially literally shrink yourself. And there's, like you said, that there's some virtue in suffering. And I think that's a really, that's a big collective old belief.
yeah,
A lot of like religious, stuff in there too around virtue and suffering. And
yeah,
I think that it's really threaded through diet culture and all of the stuff related to body images. Like somehow you feel good if you suffer. Now you're good enough because I've suffered enough.
yeah,
And yet I mean, the truth is that we're good enough already. That
yes,
idea actually takes us away from experiencing that.
yeah.
Yeah,
There is no virtue in suffering whatsoever.
I would
And it
agree.
and
I
it
would agree.
you know, there's this idea that's come up from a few different spiritual people that I've been engaging with. And I know it's been super hard for me to wrap my head around up until this point where I'm starting to like really internalize it. And that is suffering is optional. Like we don't need to suffer. And you know what you when you mentioned, women literally shrinking themselves, and that is, I think, linked to suffering and trying to shrink ourselves. I think the other thing for me about pleasure is that pleasure is expansive. It's the opposite of shrinking. It's taking up space. It's taking up space energetically in the world in a positive way that like allows other people to also expand, right? Every time any one of us expands, we create space for other people to expand as well.
That's the truth. That's true. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
I think this is, I just really am seeing how this really is a portal for people to actually feel good in their body and to
yeah,
heal also stuff around body image. is through this access to pleasure and that connection to the body and listening to it in that way, because there's so much, I mean, there's so much shame too around sexuality that's been in the culture for so long too. I mean, I even feel it in myself, like a bit of like, I'm like, oh, like talking about sexuality, it's not as open as I could be with it. And I'm like, where does that come from? I'm like, oh yeah, I can see where that's come from, like through, lineages and all that kind of stuff. Um, but I mean, it's really linked to the body, to power, and to self-worth too. I think that's a big one is, am I worthy of pleasure,
Yes. I had my own breakthrough epiphany with self-worth a few weeks ago. It was one of the sessions that left me crying on my living room floor. I always thought I had great self-esteem, and I never thought that I had self-worth issues, but I was working with a really great peer of mine as a coach. And I was like, no, I feel good. I feel great. And she kept digging. She's like, there's something under that, Jen. There's something under that. And it just, something opened. Like that was definitely one of those like absolute moments in my life where I went, oh my God, I haven't allowed myself, it was to feel joy. I was like, I haven't allowed myself
Mm.
to feel joy because I don't feel worthy of joy. And like, I sat there bawling and in absolute shock because my ego had built this lie to myself that I believed I was worthy, and to uncover that I actually deep down didn't feel worthy. And I can now point to many moments in my life where I made decisions based on that inherent unworthiness. And it just blew my mind. And I think that's another big, since having that moment, that is another big element in my coaching. Like, I truly think all of us have a self-worthiness journey to do. Like, I think until we get to that point where we absolutely, truly embody that we're worthy, we can't get some of the other things that we want in our lives. So I think that's a major, major piece to pleasure, to body image, is that worthiness.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, unworthiness is a huge theme in the work that shows up with clients who've been spending years, well, just trying to change their body to feel worthy enough, to feel good enough. And I think that is the biggest lie, is that we have to somehow work for our worthiness or be different in order to be good enough. And that is the lie. That's the thing that's just covering over
Yeah,
the fact that we're already worthy. Like the whole joke is like, actually, it's right here, right now. We're already worthy. We're already good enough. But it's just these beliefs and conditioning from years that's in the culture that we've innocently adopted, that we maybe just got conditioned right into kind of coming into this world, that we're starting to lighten up and to see through and to uncover, to realize like anything that we really want, we can have.
yeah,
It's just an idea that says, oh no, you can't have it unless, or only this kind of person has it, or not for you. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. We're all born worthy. I mean, by virtue of being human, we're worthy of all the beautiful experiences that are possible to humans. Every single one of us are born
Yeah.
worthy of those experiences. And we just, sometimes it's like we get the zap put on us from society. And sometimes I think it's especially double zapped for women, but we've all been worthy since day one.
Yeah. What what would you say are the common challenges or the things that you kind of see that come up for a lot of women that you work with?
I think there's a lot of, we kind of touched on this before, there's a lot of being in the head. A lot of women, myself included, are overthinkers. And if you're in the head, you can't get in the body. It makes it harder to connect. So that's one major piece of the work, is like, let's turn this off for a minute so that we can connect to our body. And our bodies never lead us wrong. There's so much research that's been done that shows that our bodies know what's good for us. Our body can lead the way. Our body can lead us to transformation. So that's a major, major piece that comes up in coaching. And the second is that worthiness piece. Like, women are often cut off from sometimes being able to orgasm, being able to experience pleasure, because they just don't feel that they are, and they don't put it in those words, but if you dig underneath, they don't feel worthy of that pleasure, of that orgasm. They, and I hear so many women, like, they make sure that their male, sorry, there's this little fly buzzing around in here. It's making me crazy. They'll do everything to ensure that their partner has sexual pleasure and that their
Right.
partner is fulfilled. And I'm not even fulfilled sexually, like fulfilled in life, right? Like, women will give and give and give and give and give, and they just struggle to turn that same level of love and caring to themselves and to their pleasure and to their intimate life. So there's a little bit of unlearning that has to happen, I think, for a lot of women to be able to, like, do that and to, start to see the changes in their pleasure life and their intimate life.
Yeah. And I think that's so important, to be able to create these equal partnerships too, is you have to know that you're worthy of of what you want, and you're worthy to ask, and all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, it feel like it all feels like one of the absolute biggest underpinning is you're worthy, you're born worthy. And you're worthy to expand. You're worthy to
Yeah.
expand into pleasure, into transformation, into the best version of you, into the person you've always wanted to be, to the desires and the goals that you've always
Mm.
wanted. You are worthy to expand into that. Every single one of us.
And isn't that the truth too, of like, where if we feel we can't expand in our bodies, like heaven forbid you gain weight, that's an expansion. We're told that that's wrong. We're told that that's bad, that that's ugly, that makes you not good enough. And I'm not, saying like, oh, we must expand to be the biggest physical body version. It's like, but even just this deep fear of expansion, like you can't even expand a little bit, whether it's physically, whether it's emotionally or energetically, whatever, to take up that space. So I'm, yeah, I like that you offer this as a way for women to just really connect with their worthiness, to shed those layers that might prevent them from experiencing pleasure, and a way to just really, yeah,
Yeah.
connect with their pleasure and their worthiness.
Yeah.
Is-
And it makes me so happy to, like, see people step into it and blossom and expand. Like, it's a privilege to do the work. Truly.
Yeah. So is there anything else that you would want to share with somebody who is curious about this path?
Uh, yeah, they should head on over to my website. I've got a free resource up about touchless orgasm that they can just download, and they can start the journey in the privacy of their own home. And if they want to go deeper, I'm actually offering a beta course that starts on April 24th. And I'll create a code for your audience so they can get it at 50% off, which would only be
Awesome.
$300. And that would also include it's a bonus of 2 private one-on-one coaching sessions with me. So we can really dig into whatever their block is. If it's that worthiness piece, we can really get into it one-on-one. Um, yeah. And yeah, the biggest thing I would say to anybody is, kind of what's the thread through this whole conversation is, no matter what you look like right now, where you are in life right now, you are worthy, and you are worthy to expand. Like, it is yours for the
Mm.
taking.
Yeah, that's beautiful and empowering. So people can come to your website, which I'm gonna link, and I'm gonna put that code below the video too, that people can access for that beta course. And are you anywhere else that people can find you? Is there a social media that they should know about?
Yeah, I'm mostly on Instagram, which is also just my name, Jenn Wodtke.
Okay, so I will link to those resources for people. Well, thanks for sharing what you do, Jen, and having this conversation. And if anyone's watching and they're curious to explore this path, then head on over to Jen.
Yes, I would love to see you. And of course, anybody can also just shoot me an email. I'm happy to, help if I can with anything over email. So don't hesitate to reach out.
That's awesome. Thanks so much, Jen.
Thank you so much for having me.